Hello YouTube, hello everyone, and today joining me is the wonderful returning guest, SchizophrenicQueen.
Whee!
And the equally wonderful recurring guest, MidnyteGoddess.
Hello.
And, well, today's first topic concerns a video, and there's an article linked in the description as ever, where a Christian youth group seem to think that violence is funny, like a man taking a baseball bat to a woman, for example. I personally watched this and found it more cringeworthy than distressing, because I didn't feel, although the heading is emphasising that it's violence against women, I mainly felt that it was a grotesquely bad attempt at being funny. Probably because it's aimed at the young, it sort of in some ways misses its mark, the attempts at slapstick. So while I can see why it's objectionable, I mainly just thought it was stupid. But Queenie, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's kind of telling. I mean, sure, they're not likely to do that to you while you're in service, but there is the implication because of the video. Do what we say or else. And, but it's all fun and games, and it's all funny, and so it's okay because it's only comedy and all this sort of thing. And I don't usually get down on comedy. I mean, personally, I too thought it was stupid and not necessarily that serious, but at the same time, it's aimed at people who are impressionable and who may not necessarily realize the bounds of what is acceptable for the purpose of comedy and these things.
Yeah, I think you're right. The biggest thing is impressionable people and religious people saying these are the rules, obey the rules. Yeah, basically, at least an implicit threat of violence. It's sort of, maybe they're just trying to dress up authoritarianism with, it's just a joke. MidnyteGoddess, your thoughts?
I first of all think it's absolutely disgusting that, these people are supposed to be, God-fearing, love thy fellow man type people, and they're making a mockery not only out of violence, but violence against, women. And a lot of times if someone thinks it's funny, it can be absolutely debilitating to get out of relationships like that, whether you're a man or a woman. And the fact that this is the same group of people who tried to have the Allowing Violence Against Women Act to be reinstated. And for those people who don't know what that is, it's you can't rape your wife kind of thing. You can beat her as long as the stick is no thicker than your thumb. Things of that nature are all fall under the Allowing Violence Against Women Act. And I think this is just absolutely disgusting, especially in a society, especially like America, where people are at least somebody is sexually assaulted every 2 minutes. So this is a huge problem, not just the battery part of it, but the other types of assault that take place. They're teaching these people at a young age that it's okay to be violent and it's okay to hurt other people. And they should be teaching them to love thy fellow man, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Turn the other cheek, things like that. Not, here's a really cool way to beat your wife. It's not only is it making that spouse an object, but it's saying, even the children who are boys are above their mother. And if you can't hold womanhood in high esteem, beginning with your mother, you're not going to have a successful relationship with a woman, because you're just going to see them as an object, and eventually they'll leave or you'll kill them.
So basically, Christians being hypocritical and missing the point, using threats of violence to get their way, and being misogynist. Yeah. I was going to make some sarcastic remark about whether that's a new thing or not, but it's implicit. It's already there.
Yeah.
Queenie, anything else to add?
Not really. I mean, I feel like we've pretty much covered it.
Oh, wow, that's the shortest segment ever. That's like that's the,
I do also
yeah.
I'm reading the article again. Just want to point out that many Republicans are Catholic, and they have been trying since 2011, the Republicans, to redefine rape to exclude date rape and statutory rape. So if say a teacher had sex with a student, that wouldn't be considered rape anymore because it wouldn't be statutory rape. Things like, think of it in that kind of context.
Okay. And on that bombshell, final thoughts and goodbye from Queenie.
Oh, well, I mean, the kind of debasement of women in general is something that we need to be more vigilant of and like crack down on a bit more in our society, especially since we do live in, and I'm kind of one of these people who's kind of loath to admit it, but we do live in a rather misogynistic society, and so we do need to work towards that sort of equality where, beating one of these girls with a baseball bat isn't seen as a comedy gag, and so that is my thing. And good night.
And final thoughts and a goodbye from Midnight Goddess.
My final thought is, how scary is it that on domesticviolencestatistics.org they say that every 9 seconds in the U.S. a woman is assaulted or beaten. That's someone's little girl, mother, sister, cousin. It's got to stop, people. So this is Midnight Goddess saying good night, and please think before you act.
And I wish I could think of anything to add to that, so I'm just going to say it's good night from me. Good evening, YouTube. Good evening, everyone. And a happy Tuesday to boot. And joining me once again are Midnight Goddess.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And SchizophrenicQueen.
Hiya.
Right, and once again, relevant article links in the description. Basically, an example of the most idiotic slut-shaming I've ever heard. A young woman left a cafe in tears after being called a slut for breastfeeding. And you would really think that we wouldn't have such a huge problem with slut-shaming in a place like 21st century London. Basically, as I understand it, the staff of the cafe were completely on her side. Midnight Goddess, your thoughts?
Well, for one, it doesn't really surprise me that people have acted this bizarrely. When I was still nursing ET, I was in an area that was set up for women who are breastfeeding, couches, things like that. And the only people who could see into this area were the other women using the facilities. And people would actually get mad at you. Your child's covered up with a blanket, you're breastfeeding, and they would yell at you for doing this in quote-unquote public, and when they would bring their kids in to use the washroom. But this was it was a zone specifically for breastfeeding. And I believe as well this restaurant was breastfeeding friendly as well. That's why they picked it.
Mm.
And I think it's kind of sad that a completely normal act of caring for your child and things like that is subjected to being called a slut. It's a completely normal and natural thing. It's just breasts. It's just feeding your child, being a good parent. You know, and for somebody to call her a slut over that, it's just out and out disgusting. You know, I think the people who did it should be ashamed of themselves. And I think that more people have to kind of talk about this subject so that down the road, more people don't have to have the same stigma attached to them because they're nursing.
Yeah, and as you say, this was a cafe that, you know, has a policy of being breastfeeding friendly, and the old couple that said these things can always take their business elsewhere. Queenie?
I think people need to get a fucking reality check on how biology works. I mean, seriously. And it's not even like she's flailing her boobs out there everywhere and all this sort of thing. It's just like you're feeding your baby, and that's it. And it's simple biology, and I think that, you know, I don't know why people are so up in arms about this. And you hear about people getting kicked out of places for breastfeeding, and it's like, it's so bizarre to me because, like Midnight said, it's a perfectly natural process. And I think it's because people are kind of ass backwards. Everyone has their own sort of standards they're trying to foist around other people, and I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, shock, horror, humans are mammals. But
fuck mammals. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I am shocked that. With you, Midnight, another woman did this, another mother did this.
Yeah, and it didn't matter if the child that they were bringing in the washroom was male or female. So it's like they were just trying to hide that this is how things work, you know?
Mm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to point out that the gender of the child wasn't ever an issue. They didn't care if it was a boy or girl they were bringing in.
Yeah. But yeah, it does seem like an example of how repressed we are as a culture still, breeding not only a kind of misogyny, but this thing that does exist, female misogyny.
Oh, definitely. I would agree that female misogyny does exist.
Yeah. So I would categorize this under that, because you're seriously, as a woman and a mother yourself, trying to tell someone else that what they're doing is somehow disgusting. But, Queenie, anything to add?
Well, you kind of see it on both sides. People are constantly trying to police each other, and I just think calling someone a slut is the wrong way to go about it, especially when, personally, I don't think that breastfeeding is anywhere near quote-unquote slutty behavior. I mean, everything's slutty behavior by the standards that you see out in the media. Like, oh, you know, I'm laying on my bed. I'm obviously a slut, you know. I'm the biggest slut in the room, and all this sort of thing. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I suppose it's not surprising that we still have people who want to police people's bodies when it comes to something like, say, family planning.
You even see it in feminism.
Yeah.
You see it between the different tiers of feminism, where you have the rad femmes, you have the Tumblr feminists, you know, you have the sex positive feminists, you have like just general feminism and general feminists. And then you have the women who are MRAs and against the Tumblr feminists. It's like
it's like they're telling you can only have one piece of the pie, and they're each telling you that it's a different piece, but you can have this part of the pie and nothing else. And I'm kind of like, fuck it, I want the whole fucking pie, and you're not going to stop me.
No, I totally agree with you there, because I find that so frustrating. You know, like, it's like, really? You're going to tell me what to do? I'm 32, and you're just going to, like, seriously?
That somebody somewhere will want to police boobs, or even ban them. I think that should have been actually the topic of the show. Should boobies be banned?
If you're going to ban my boobies, can I at least get them chopped off? Like, that's something I've wanted to do for a long time, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Well,
not that I think there's anything wrong with boobies. I think boobies are perfectly fine. They're just not in accordance with my personal preference for my body.
Well, I think unfortunately it would be an outright rule for everybody, which is what these people always want is absolutely everybody, whatever your preference, etc. So, okay, does anybody have anything? I'll open up the floor if there are any closing remarks.
I think that we need to get the proverbial stick out of our asses and stop picking battles that aren't really important to pick, because breastfeeding, you know, someone getting upset about breastfeeding, there's so many more things in this world that we need to be focusing on whether or not someone's doing a perfectly normal thing. It just frustrates me to no end. It's like, get your heads out of your asses and focus on something that's worth focusing on.
Okay, and Queenie, anything to add?
Not really. Just same as Midnight. People need to get the stick out of their ass.
Okay, that's an excellent summation. So, it's good night from Midnight.
Good night, and please remember, head up ass is not the right direction.
And a good night from Queenie.
Fight the power!
And it's a good night from me. Happy Wednesday, Internet. Happy Wednesday, everyone. And tonight I introduce returning guest Ujames1978.
Hello there, this is James S. Crockett, Ujames1978.
And another returning guest from some time back, Dr. Smith.
How you doing?
Now, today's topic is, right, here in London, and I don't know about anywhere else, it looks like they're bringing in spikes to put in doorways in order to stop homeless people sleeping there, as if that's the best possible solution to a homelessness problem. And what are you essentially saying? It reminds me of the spikes you put down on windowsills to stop pigeons. Somebody I was talking to earlier today, in fact it was MidnyteGoddess, said, so treating homeless people literally like vermin then. If you scroll down on the article linked in the description, you'll see that you can vote. Is this acceptable? Is this not? Now, the majority of people, of course, say no. More than a third of people, however, do think that this is an acceptable way to treat the homeless. I'm going to hand this over to you, James.
Are there no prisons, no poorhouses? Well, let them die and thus decrease the surplus population. Jesus fucking Christ, people. For the love of the great holy donkey. You don't want homeless people sleeping in your doorways. So, what's the best possible solution? Oh yes, we'll put down spikes so that they can't possibly lay there. You know, and so, with any luck, they'll freeze to death. What MidnyteGoddess said, what you have said about treating homeless people like vermin, yes, Alex. The dehumanization here is palpable. It's revolting. It is almost literally sickening. One thing I mentioned last week while I was talking to Luke, the difference between liberal or conservative, the difference when it comes to any political or social issue, the fundamental question which it all boils down to, can you look beyond yourself to see the perspective of other people, to care about other people? Do you give a shit about the people who are suffering? Or, to put it bluntly, are you a self-serving sack of dog shit? Yes, the people who are putting this down, the people who are putting down these spikes, the 34% of people who agree that, yes, this is totally acceptable. Oh, yes, because of all of the rationalizations we've come up with. Oh, no, they all have homes, really. Oh, no, they're all mentally ill. They're all criminals. If they're mentally ill, they need treatment. Oh, no, that's too expensive. Oh, and of course, we could end the problem of homelessness tomorrow by raising taxes, but that would be socialism. And you need a new zombie voice app for your iPod. Oh, yes, I am being so cynical here and so holier than thou, but Jesus fucking Christ, people. How can you possibly view this as an alternative? Businesses are the ones putting down these spikes. Instead of, hey, pooling their resources and creating a homeless shelter in the area. It doesn't have to be fancy. These people need 4 walls, a ceiling, heating, water, and mattresses, or sleeping bags, something. But no, putting down these spikes is the best solution.
If you're used to sleeping in a doorway with cardboard boxes and you're lucky to have a sleeping bag, you might not even require mattresses. I mean,
as I say, a sleep something. Yeah. It reminds me of. I think it was Westminster Council a couple of years ago closed all soup kitchens in the area because they, quote, promoted homelessness. Yes, because... Yes, what incentive is there for these people to get off the streets if they can get a free meal once a day?
Well, you were as shy as ever, James.
Oh yes. I need to learn to assert myself more. I just find it so difficult to put across my opinion.
And if you're not too scared, Dr. Smith.
I got on my iPad and I was looking at pictures of the spikes as he was speaking. And I was listening to what he was saying, and it's a shame that they think they need to come to this to stop. I guess they think they're going to put the homeless people at bay by not letting them sleep in a corner or whatnot. I guess with the energy they're focusing on putting these down, I guess I just come to the conclusion of why aren't they just trying to think of ways to try and work on getting these people off the streets and into a shelter or, doing something about the problem in a more positive manner. I don't know. To me, it seems like bullshit. I haven't seen anything here in the United States like that. I lived in a town near Pittsburgh. I was over in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for close to 11 years, and I would see homeless people frequently over there.
Yeah.
I'd see people sleeping under bridges, and I'd always feel pity for those people, and think I'd want to see them in a better situation. And when I see something like this, I'm looking at the mirror right now, and they show a picture of it's close to a doorway, like a little corner where somebody could maybe stand and have a cigarette to keep out of the downpour or rain or snow. And now there's spikes. I mean, even from just a standpoint, it's ugly, you know, and it's an eyesore to me for one thing. And then another, you know, to think, well, we're going to eliminate anybody standing in this corner, not just a homeless person. It's stupid. They could do something better with their time than put down spikes. And for that matter, I think anybody that's got any intelligence is just going to take, like, say, a pallet and throw it over it, and then problem solved.
Well, yeah, I did think that there would be ways, but I suppose it's making it more difficult. I'm also wondering, is it safe? Because, I mean, people on the street fall over, children play. Is it safe for anyone, as well as being... Yes, we don't want... one of the reasons they might not want a homeless person in the doorway, although it's not going to be during business hours generally anyway, but are they saying, it's an eyesore or it will put customers off? Except you've put an eyesore there yourself. It's sort of like...
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to solve the problem of the fear of fire by starting my own fire. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna... if you're finished, Dr. Smith.
No. I didn't really have much to add other than I agree with what he said, and just my add is even if you're not looking at it from a homeless standpoint, it looks stupid, and it's, to me, it's not really effective. Again, if I were a homeless person and I was in a jam and I needed some place to lay down, I'd just go around the corner, grab a pallet, throw it down, curl up in my sleeping bag and sleep. Yeah,
so it may not. It's offensive, but it may not even be effective. One thing I'll add is I think it's very indicative of the world that we're living in now, in that it's a business that makes money, trying to screw over the poorest people yet again. Let's find new ways. So I'll go round and have final Wednesday thoughts and goodbyes. So, James, your final thought and goodbye.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore, and may the blessings of the great holy donkey be upon the 64%.
And, Dr. Smith, your final thought and goodbye.
I don't think that spike strip thing is going to work at all. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think that they could focus their efforts on doing something more positive rather than something negative like that.
Absolutely.
Well said. It won't work. B, the motivation is just so callous and so evil.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And on that bombshell, it's good night from me. Happy Thursday, Internet. Happy Thursday, everyone. And once again, I'd like you to give a warm welcome to James.
Hello there, this is James Ujames1978.
And Dr. Smith.
Hello.
And basically, tonight, the article linked in the description concerns the idiot Michael Gove. To anyone who doesn't know, he is the British Secretary of State for Education, and what he's proposing now is that if school kids are disrespectful to teachers, then their parents ought to be punished. James, your thoughts?
I'm not bigoted, but doesn't everyone wish that it was 1953? Throwback politician appealing to I'm not bigoted, but bring back national service. What are all these foreigners doing in our country? Oh, wasn't it so much better when we could smack our kids? No. It's not even, they're calling it proposals. It was a speech. It's what Josh, the other guest tonight, referred to as peacocking before we started recording. This is just posturing and bluster. I'm not sure if the internet service providers here in Britain ever did block pornography, but unless we specifically opted into the service. But that was something else that David Cameron promised last year in the desperate hope to win votes by playing to the audience. But no, and yes, addressing the whole question of disrespectful children. Define disrespectful. Disrespectful having an opinion. Disrespectful refusing to be bullied. There was a wonderful little joke on Facebook. Dad, can you pick me up from school? I've been suspended. Why? What happened? My teacher pointed a ruler at me and said, at the end of this ruler is an idiot. So I said, which end? In Britain, in America, across most of the Western world and Asia, with the exception of Scandinavia, particularly Finland, the education system is assumed to be in collapse. Is assumed to be in decay because children are rebelling, children are answering back, children are refusing to conform. They're thinking for themselves. In the age of the internet, in an age of intellectual independence, where they can have friendships with people all over the world, find out things for themselves, etc. Countries like Finland, which have had this education system for decades, realise that yes, independence learning, allowing children to learn what they want to learn, as opposed to sitting them down and regimenting them, demanding obedience. One video I saw a short while ago described our current education system as a mirror of our employment system. You take a child full of wonder and eagerness to learn the world about the world around them, full of inspiration and hope for the future, and you crush their souls by regimenting them and teaching them what they need to know and no more, and then you send them into the factories. Albert Einstein, the greatest example of a genius crushed by education. So, as I say, it works in Finland, but as I said before, this is just an appeal to the past, when the problem is that we are moving into the future. At this moment, we are in what I describe as the adolescence of humanity. The old days of authority and obedience and what have you are slowly passing into the history books. People are becoming more independent. Teenagers especially are becoming more independent. People are thinking for themselves, but we don't know what we want yet. We're trapped between two ideas, what the world used to be and what the world could be. And people like Michael Gove are screaming, yes, let's take it back to the good old days, with caning and punishing the parents. And, yes, bring back hanging.
Yes, well, I've definitely heard... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I've definitely heard good things, including from you, about the Scandinavian education systems and the Finnish education system. Yes, a British school is halfway to being a borstal in comparison, I think.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, you were telling me something about that they're basically given iPads and they learn about what they want to learn about. They've got a lot of freedom in the classroom.
Oh yes, in Finland you don't even start school until you're 7, if I remember correctly, and then you start off in what's called a forestry school. Or is that the correct term? Excuse me. Perhaps someone who knows more about this can correct me in the comments.
In the comment section.
In the comment section.
Any Finnish people out there?
But yes, the idea is exploration, learning through play. And the iPad thing that I was talking about before was an advert I've seen for American schools, funnily enough. But again, the same. That's the thing. It's the idea of independent learning, etc. It's been part of. It is the basis of Finnish education, but the world is changing. As much as people like Michael Gove struggle to keep it the same or to drag it back, teachers especially are realizing that yes, independent learning through technology is the solution. Individual schools, individual school districts, individual states taking up parts of the Finnish model. So
yeah. I think from what I can remember, school in the UK is still a bit militaristic. It's still a bit standing in a line. It's still a bit marshal them through the doors, stand up, sit down. It is very kind of very must obey orders.
Yes, nowhere near as much as countries like Japan or Korea, but
no.
Yeah, but still, and again, Finland beats. The assumption is that yes, countries like Japan, Korea, China would have the greatest education in the world because of this regimentation, because of this blind obedience and respect for authority. No, Finland tops the charts every single time in every possible respect. They also have the lowest number of student suicides, student violence, student shootings, drug addiction, because they're not under crippling pressure. Right.
And you would think that people would look at facts like that when they think about how to marshal these things.
No, it's we like to pretend that we are rational, but we are, in so many cases, we are so blinded by our bigotries, by our prejudices. No, we like regimented children.
It's one of those things that works on paper.
Yeah.
Like, capital punishment works on paper. For example, as a deterrent, you would think, but actually look at the statistics, it doesn't work.
No.
But any case, before I go too off topic, finally, it's your turn, Dr. Smith. Your take on this.
Just to be clear, I want to make sure this is talking about punishing parents for their kids.
Yes.
Wait a minute. For their kids acting up in school or in general?
In school, if they disrespect a teacher.
It's a touchy subject. And the only thing I can really say in regards to it is growing up in the Midwest and seeing how some of the teachers treated us in the 80s, you'd get to a point where you would talk back. And so on one hand, I would say, no, a parent shouldn't necessarily be punished. However, the flip to this is, in this day and age, I've seen a lack of respect from a lot of juvenile kids in this day and age, being that I worked as a mall security guard for close to 4 years at a fairly busy mall. And I could remember specifically not being mean or nice, just being firm and asking kids to move along where they weren't supposed to stand, blocking the ways for customers at the mall or whatnot. And I would see these things that some of these kids would do that would just blow your mind. I can remember specifically, I don't know how graphic I can get on your show. Am I free reign?
Yeah, go.
Okay, I specifically remember getting a call from one of the stores that had a camera to watch for loss prevention. They'd shot it out into the mall just to see who was coming up to the store. There was a soft seating in front of the store, and a young kid was catcalling. You couldn't hear him, but you could see him catcalling at girls. Gets up, whips his Johnson out, starts shaking it at her. Then he gets on the couch and he starts humping it. Now, at that point, the loss prevention guy who was filming this had gone and called my boss and the other security officer that was on duty with him. They walked over, got the kids, took them over to the store, to the back room where their loss prevention is. The mom shows up to pick these two kids up, and she's like, not my kid. My kid wouldn't do this. They throw the videotape in, and the mom had to, eat her words in a sense. Now, where I'm going with all this is that I think it's a case-by-case incident. I think there's some parents that could give two shits about their kids. They don't care. I saw it for close to 4 or 5 years where Mom and Dad would drop little Johnny and little Susie off at the mall, and they'd tell them, we'll pick you up at 9 o'clock, or they would tell them, you're going to need to get a ride home from Bobby and Mary Sue or whoever. And these kids were left to fend for themselves, and you could just tell, watching them, that Mom and Dad hasn't shown them any respect or taught them how to show them any respect to other people. They're just running around, being obnoxious, being rude, not so much as even caring about, am I offending anybody to my left or to my right? That's not to say that all kids are that way. So I guess to respond to your whole thing, I think it would have to boil down to what's going on at home. Are the parents really making an effort to raise their kids? And in fairness to the parents in this day and age, it's just not so easy to where mom can stay at home and raise the kids while dad's at work doing 9 to 5.
Exactly, Josh. And this was the point I was making, that at the moment we are caught between two realities, two ways of life, two cultures. The past where mum used to stay at home, dad would work, etc. Children were regarded as property. Now both parents are working, or just one parent working, or what have you. Children pretty much left to raise themselves. Independence, but not knowing, not understanding what comes with. More independent, but not understanding what comes with independence. So, yes, people like Michael Gove and so many people across the world are screaming, pull us backwards, take us backwards. No, that is not the solution. As much as we like to pretend that the world was better back then, it simply wasn't. We've got to try and find a new way to live, to raise our kids.
Growing up, I come from a broken family where my stepdad had a drinking problem. My mom had issues. She still does to this day. I ended up moving in with my dad later on in life and my stepmom, and that wasn't better, but it wasn't worse. But I remember our family going to counseling for a while. And I've always thought of, we went to this Catholic priest who was supposed to counsel us, and it was just a train wreck to begin with. My mom raised us Baptists, and here we were going and getting counseling from a Catholic person, which to me was just weird because my mom was very aghast with other religions. She was always, this is the right way, they're all wrong, and I always was more on the, can't we all just get along and have different opinions? At the end of the day, we're all trying to get to heaven. Back then I felt that way. But the guy made this excellent point. He was talking about spanking us in terms of, like, my mom had brought it up in a conversation. And we were all so belittled, it was me, my brother, and my sister, to really respond to whether we disagreed with it, because we felt like we'd go home and we'd never hear the end of it from my mom. We're like, oh, yeah, it's okay. But truly, we didn't. And the reason I'm bringing this up is James kind of was talking about the old days. I don't necessarily think, beating a kid's ass is always the solution. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, But I think that, having a heavy hand all the time is definitely not going to win your kids over or their respect for you.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I think that from what I've seen, again, as being a mall security guard, it just seems like this generation that was raising this next generation coming up, they're frequently broken homes. You have teen pregnancy, which led to having kids. I called it the instant oatmeal relationship, where you'd have a guy and a girl that thought they liked each other in high school. They got together. She got pregnant really quick. But then, after about a year or two, they realized this isn't working. Now mom's got the kid. That's typically in America how it is. And dad, is kind of like moved on. And so now mom is, trying to find that guy. The big ball of wax here is that, you've got broken relationships, not just necessarily with husbands and wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, but kids and families. It's just, it's really hard to weed through. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer for how.
Yeah.
I don't think he's necessarily going about it right.
Yeah.
By punishing the parents for anything the kid does wrong in school. You can't always be accountable for your children.
Well, you said judge by a case-by-case basis. I mean, so some of the time it's the parents' fault to some extent. If we take the example you gave of the kids who did, well, let's face it, if an adult male behaved that way, that would definitely be a very serious criminal issue.
Absolutely.
And we've talked a lot recently about this kind of thing. If a man or if a young man behaves that way in a college or something, and in this instance, if it were up to you to fine that mother, say $50, $100, would you think of that as a possible solution?
Again, that's a really tough call. I think it would have to depend on the circumstances. I think, taking money away from somebody that might be a single parent and is really struggling and is working hard and is able to be there for a kid is not really fixing the problem. It's making
the government we have right now wouldn't understand that. If anything, I kind of think part of it is to rob the poor a bit more. But sorry, carry on.
No, it's all right. I don't know if there's such an easy fix. I think there needs to be maybe something. I don't know. I mean, is there some way where you could put the kid and the mom together and see what's going on? If this is a repeated problem where Johnny is having outbursts in school and just doing stuff to be a pain in the ass. Because just fining just seems like a bandage over the problem, not really fixing the problem. And I say that very loosely and sarcastically.
Yeah. You, James, any response?
Yes. Basically, it comes down to the attitude what Alex and I were talking about before the recording break. You'd think that facts would have some part to play in this. No, whether it's children, whether it's crime, no, regardless of the specific situation, our first instinct is always to punish. And no, the statistics prove, studies prove conclusively, spanking doesn't work. Death penalty as a deterrent does not work. Imprisonment as a deterrent does not work. I do remember studying statistics during part of my law course a few years ago. The statistics related to the death penalty. The only way that something like the death penalty actually works is if it's for minor crimes like shoplifting or looting during a natural disaster. Police in cities like Los Angeles during an earthquake have been given, under martial law, being given the authority to shoot looters dead without trial. That's the only time when capital punishment actually works as a deterrent. When the punishment should fit the crime. No, when you are murdering people for nicking running shoes, that's when it works. But
no, James, you bringing that up made me think though of what I kind of went into another subject, and I had a point I was trying to make earlier, which was when we were sitting around doing this counseling, the priest brought up, that he didn't think it was right to spank, and he'd brought up the old scripture, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." And my mom's interpretation was that you should beat a kid's ass when they're acting up, and he didn't take it that way at all. It was more of a giving a more civil punishment when kids are acting up, and knowing when to reward kids when they're behaving right.
Yeah, so again, spare the rod and spoil the child. It's the joys of the English language. But but basically, the main point you were making is the point you were making there towards the end. Can we actually try and deal with the underlying problem? How is fining or otherwise punishing parents going to help anyone? It doesn't help. It makes us feel better. And also, yes. Child pregnancy and drug abuse and child rape and disobedient children and children murdering other children. None of that ever happened before the wishy-washy lefty liberal socialist pinko commie fags ever came into power. Full fucking shit. In study of things like the death penalty in Britain before it was finally abolished. Oh God, one child who was hanged when he was 13 for murdering a 10-year-old boy to steal the money he was collecting for charity. Long before the Jamie Bulger atrocity, there were other children who murdered children just because they wanted to and because they could. Child pregnancy in Victoria, and children out of wedlock, etc. In Victorian London, the police were so sick of dead babies being dumped. Baby was born, but it was incest. It was a child pregnancy. It was out of wedlock, etc., etc., etc. So they just killed the baby and dumped them by the river. They were so sick of this happening. There was such an outrage that they stationed an officer near the bridge to try and stop it. But after one night, there were so many people in the prison cells. There were so many dead babies that they had to stop. Because it was taking up all of their resources. And yes, we were talking earlier this evening, Alex, about the film, the book, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, and also the hypocrisy of Victorian society. One quote, I can't remember if it was a quote. I do remember someone saying about Victorian society, this is paraphrasing because I barely remember it, Victorian England was personified by a perfectly neat, prim and proper parlour, drawing room, where tea is served precisely at 4 o'clock and everyone minds their P's and Q's, while at the same time there is an opium ring and child prostitution ring in the bedroom. Yes, this idea that the good old days were any better is wrong on every possible level. At the absolute best, we used to beat children into submission, and they were so until to the point where they were so terrified of answering back. That was how the school system used to work. That is how parenting used to work. So yes, unruly kids, etc., etc., etc. And yes, we need to find new ways, but as Josh himself has stated, we have to try and fix the underlying problems rather than just making a speech saying that we're going to punish the parents because it sounds good, because it will win votes from the yes, bring back National Service Brigade.
Aha. And Josh, do you have any final thoughts?
I think James and I pretty much are on the same page agreeing with this. There's got to be a better way to do it than fining parents for this. Yeah. If it were a parent that you just knew that was totally out of the picture and little Johnny and Susie really needed their mom and dad, I would say absolutely. But it's not always so simple as that when mom and dad are struggling and just trying to take care of their kids, and they can't always be present there.
Exactly. Oh, so you're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to work 2 jobs, desperately trying to keep your children alive, keep food on the table, and because they resent you for not being there, they're acting out at school and calling the teacher a blank, blank, blankety blank, so which we're going to fine you, we're going to take the money that you need to buy your children new clothes, new shoes, etc., and then the school is going to call child services and take the children away from you because you can't look after them properly. Problem solved!
Yeah.
And on that bombshell, could we have a good night from James?
May the blessings of the great holy donkey be upon you all.
And a good night from Dr. Smith.
Take care, everyone.
And it's good night from me. Good evening, Internet. Good evening, everyone. On a day which it might be Friday, it might be Saturday. I'm personally a little bit confused, but it's definitely one or the other. And once again, please welcome my guests, Ujames1978.
Hello there, this is James Ujames1978, and hooray for the weekend!
Hooray! And Dr. Smith.
Hello, everyone.
And, right, again, article linked in the description. Now, this isn't an entirely new phenomena. It's people, I suppose, because of the age of the sort of media that we have now, people see something terrible happening. Do they help, or do they take out their camera phones for one reason or another? And I think this actually even happened a few years back with the London bombings. There's quite a lot of footage, but sometimes you think, in fact, there's a reference in a show by David Rennick, a writer that I know you know, James.
Yeah.
And he wrote a show called Love Soup, and there's a bit where there's a character with a glass eye who talks about how he lost an eye in the 7/7 bombings. And initially this evokes sympathy, that he's lost an eye in a terrorist attack. And it turns out he was in one of the train tunnels, and he was filming what was going on his phone, including videotaping this woman who whacked him in the face with something, and that's how he lost the eye. Which, although that's a comedy sort of making light of something terrible, there's also something quite poetic about it. You think he's some poor victim. In fact, he got hit in the face of being the arsehole who was filming it on his phone instead of doing something to help the victims, which is a thing that happens. There is potentially an excuse for this in some cases. For some people, the lens creates a distance. I've heard of this. It creates a barrier. You're not seeing it with your own eyes. You're seeing it through a camera lens. But the very culture that it can be that it literally seems like almost no one is helping. Which actually we do have a law in the UK since the Diana death. We've had a law. I think it's called the Good Samaritan law. I think that's in a few countries actually. That it's not necessarily legal to stand by and not help somebody. And in this instance, people were literally burning to death. And as it says in the article, the officer had never before in his life prayed for someone to die faster. and where were the people offering up anything? Just water. Who has a fire extinguisher? And most people were more interested in getting footage. James, your thoughts?
In psychology, in sociology, this is called the bystander effect, and no, it has nothing to do with the rise of social media. I cite perhaps the most cited, the most infamous example, the murder of Kitty Genovese in 1964. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. 37 people who saw the murder didn't call the police. The murderer came back twice. I believe it was over the course of half an hour to stab her again while she lay bleeding to death. And the people who were watching from their apartment windows, in some cases, turned off the lights so that they could have a better view. Mm. So, yes, the rise of social media might have exacerbated the already existing problem, but there does seem to be something fundamental, neurological, instinctive in human psychology. We cannot cope with tragedy. We don't know how to cope with tragedy. Because I asked you, if you saw a woman laid on the floor, bleeding to death, screaming, what would be your first reaction? Your first reaction would be to freeze. Your mind would go blank. You would be nauseated. Yes, you would reach for your phone, but you would be nervous. And anything you knew about medicine or first aid, unless you had been thoroughly trained, would, like a paramedic or a police officer, would just go out of your mind when you see someone dying. And also, there is I can't remember the specific name. It's been so long since I studied psychology. But whatever the crowd is doing, you join in. If the crowd is angry, if the crowd is cheering, you cheer. You might not even know what you're cheering for, but you following the crowd. And if the crowd is just standing there not doing anything, you just stand there as well. Everyone watching each other, glancing at each other. Wait, what are we going to do? What? Should I? Isn't anyone? Oh, no, so just stand here quietly then. Right. And everyone else has their... So again, this could be an extension of that. Everyone else has their phones out taking the footage. So what?
So hang on, can I ask you, Chris? Not long ago, I was on a train and somebody pulled the emergency cord. And it transpired that what the man's problem was a diabetic fit. Yeah. And the emergency services were called, I think, and the train, of course, couldn't move beyond that station and what have you. Everybody was gathered around trying to help. Are you saying that, like one person noticed, pulled the cord, tried to help, someone else got in?
Yes, that's the thing. When everyone is rushing to help, then helping becomes the normal group behaviour.
Right.
But when everyone's just gathered around watching and no one's taking action, then that becomes the normal group behaviour. Or when one person knows what to do because they're a doctor or what have you, but nobody else does know. You're just standing there like a lemon.
Okay, I have a second question, because I thought the bystander effect was that, two things. One, you assume that somebody else has called the emergency
exactly,
services.
That's it. Everyone's standing around, somebody else will have called. Yeah.
And am I right in thinking that the more witnesses there are, the bigger problem there is, because if I'm one of 100 people, I assume that at least one of the other 99 must be doing something, and if I were the only witness, then I would have done something. But I've got these other 99, so it's somebody else must be doing it. Okay,
exactly. It's herd mentality in a nutshell.
Right. Okay, Dr. Smith.
To me, it's very disheartening to see that social media has come to this, to where you've got people standing around. They'd rather film a terrible thing going on instead of trying to help. Granted, we had one guy in the article that the police officer said, hey, go around to people and see if anybody's got a fire extinguisher. And that guy readily went. But you had the rest of these people standing at this accident, just filming or taking pictures. One woman going up to the car to where the police officer had to tell her to get away from it, while he's just standing there, heartbroken over these people, and as he said in the article, he respectfully wished that they would just die a quick death, not because he wanted them to die, but rather so they would.
If I'd been in his position, an off-duty police officer, presumably carrying a weapon, because in many parts of America, especially Texas, I do believe that even off-duty police officers have to be armed, I would have sent them on their way.
Yeah, I could see that, and I would even agree with that. I would even agree with that. But back to the point, it's getting to the point, using this article as a stepping stone, the social media and how it's being used in a negative manner is just terrible. You've got... go ahead.
I would say, again, the whole point of my previous monologue, rant, whatever you want to call it, was that, no, this isn't necessarily a social media issue. In a way, in fact, I think this ties in to what we were discussing on Thursday. The behaviour of children, adolescents, teenagers, what have you. So, what shall we do about it? Well, we'll punish the parents, etc., etc., etc. This new digital age that we're in one instance, parents not necessarily being there to raise the children, and certainly not raising the children as they did 100 years ago. In the other case, social media, where things like filming, tragedy, etc., are becoming the norm. It's a question. Blaming the new thing or focusing on the thing that's different, the underlying issue is still the same. As I said on Thursday, the idea that there were no unruly children, no teen pregnancies, etc., before the wishy-washy lefty liberal socialist pinko commie Jew fags banned good parenting or banned prayer in schools. No, they didn't. You can still pray. You can't. It's just that you can't force people to pray. For fuck's sake, let that go. So yes. Oh no. There are serious social media issues. Things like happy slapping, where people deliberately assault other people on camera and then share it with their friends in a macho pissing contest to see who can look the coolest, who can commit the most horrific crime on camera. Yeah. That is a serious example. But the point you raised about the police officer telling the man in the white shirt to go around, get water, get fire extinguishers, anything. That was an example of someone taking charge. If he had stood in front of the burning car, you call 911, all of the rest of you, go back to your car, fire extinguishers, waters, blankets, anything to put out this fire, quickly, come on.
Yeah.
if someone taking charge of the situation, when people are in that herd mentality, literally waiting for someone else to take action, looking at each other. What, are you going to do something, or are you waiting for me to do something? What about him? People.
Well, I think with him, I can't speak for him directly, but I would say if I were in his shoes, being a former military police officer, and granted I didn't have a ton of things happen at my base, you got to be quick on your toes, and granted sometimes you're just thinking, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I think that goes for anybody. I would think that he might have just had that moment where he didn't think to tell all these people, this is what he's got, what you got to do. Let's do this. Let's do that.
Exactly. That's the thing. As a police officer, as a former military police officer, you would, in most cases, you were trained. And what I'm saying is, the fact that these people were standing around waiting for someone to tell them what to do, it's not necessarily that the off-duty police officer should have told them what to do. It's that they will. If they had, then they wouldn't have just been standing around with their cell phones.
And on that bombshell, if we could have final thought and goodbye from you, James.
This is a hell of a lot bigger than social media, and may the great holy donkey forgive us all.
Aha. And final thought and goodbye from Dr. Smith.
My final thought on this is when you're pointing your camera phone at somebody and there's an incident going on, be a little more thoughtful about what you're filming. And if it's an issue where it's something you could be doing instead of filming with your fucking camera, help these people, Be a good Samaritan instead of that.
Just reminds me of one stand-up comedian in America in the 1990s, summing up the Rodney King beating. To the people who filmed the attack, which it was used as evidence in the trial against the police officers who beat me, next time something like that happens, put down the damn camera and help me.
True.
Indeed. My only final thought is I've never driven a car, but I know that a lot of the time there is a fire extinguisher in the back. I don't know if it's mandatory or if I know it's a common thing that I've seen. I like to think if I were a driver watching this and I had the fire extinguisher, then I would be the one or one of the people to actually assist, but I suppose I don't know because I've not been in that situation. But in any case, it's a good night from James, it's a good night from Dr. Smith, and it's a good night from me.